White House in this, and he said that the only questions he gets about pardons are ones from the press, but you can bet, Chris, that this story is not going to go away.
No, it is not going to go away. And this is one of the reasons that administrations, and we see an increasing amount of parallelism between the Trump administration now and the Clinton administration of 20 years ago, where the press secretary has to be basically a lay attorney. The ability to answer these questions with very, very distinct tensing and what the definition of is kind of responses to preserve the president's ability to pardon these people if he thinks it's helpful to him later, to not get caught in a lie, and to lay these things out. So Georgetown might have to offer her an honorary law degree when this is all done.
I will tell you, that is definitely true when you're the White House press secretary. And, you know, the communications people always are the ones that have to deal with the leaks. In my experience, the communications folks are not the ones actually leaking. They're having to deal with it. And I'm always curious as to why the White House would not have designated someone to be this person that answers all of these questions, because as she ticked through a lot of the things that are happening, she started with the news about the economy and the uptick in the GDP growth to 2.9% last quarter. The news that South Korea and the United States have a new trade agreement, which is good news for all consumers and all these business people in both countries. There's a lot of good things for them to talk about. He's going to be talking about infrastructure tomorrow, but leading these briefings every day are questions about the Mueller investigation.
Mueller investigation, or the lawsuits, back and forth lawsuits between Trump's attorney and the sex worker who alleges their relationship and all of that jazz. It would be nice if the president's personal lawyers would step up and handle some of that freight for the White House that would like to talk about the business of government.
You know what? They didn't. I watched an entire briefing, and Stormy Daniels did not come up once, so maybe that
it was in there. They got it in. They totally got it in.
I must have been drinking my green juice at the moment. I missed it. Can I ask you about one other thing? Because I heard Sarah Sanders answer April Ryan's question about Alton Sterling. This was the man who was killed by police officers, and a decision was made in in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge, that there would not be any prosecution of those officers. Listen to what Sarah Sanders said.
Certainly a terrible incident. This is something that is a local matter, and that's something that we feel should be left up to the local authorities at this point in time.
And Chris, my ears perked up because, you know, it is true that before the internet and the cable news and everything, that a lot of these stories would have remained local stories. But that has not been the case in the last 15 years. And whether it regards to police who are killed in the line of duty and how we treat them, and then individuals that are the subject of a terrible situation. I suppose that there is not going to be a prosecution, so I can't say there was anything that was untoward that happened there, and unless it was just an accident or unfortunate situation. But to say that it was just a local matter, I imagine that ruffled some feathers.
Well, and the Attorney General down in Louisiana says that there are additional videos that they're going to release from the police body cameras, from surveillance videos nearby, that show why, that explain that the one view that we've had of this does not give an accurate depiction of what was going on. Plus, we have the toxicological reports from the deceased bloodstream at the time, and he's saying that when we put it all together, that this doesn't add up to criminal misconduct by the police. But it is the interest of the federal government, if anybody's civil rights are violated anywhere in the United States, that's why we have a federal government, and that was an opportunity for her to say, I don't know about this case, but anytime there is wrong done to people, anytime American citizens' rights are violated.
She did later on in the briefing, because other reporters picked up on it. She gave a more fulsome answer along those lines. All right, Chris Stirewalt, thank you.
You bet.
All right, switching gears now. A record number of women either running or likely to run for Congress this year, more than 500, according to Rutgers University. Jennifer Palmieri was a top advisor to Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign, and she has advice for women who want to run for public office, whether in their town, in their state, or in Washington. She also served as communications director for President Obama, and her book, Dear Madam President, is out this week, and Jennifer joins me now, and I'm really glad that you could be here today. The book is quite, it's special, right? It's a small, slim volume.
It's slim, yeah.
And I like the rose gold as well.
Yeah. Yeah, they did a nice job with the design.
Do you think that if Hillary Clinton had won, you would have written a book as well? No?
No, I don't. I think that because I see after having, I think I had two experiences, and one we share, which is I watched what happens with a women candidate, at that level, at the presidential campaign, and then the other is being a woman who worked in politics, as you and I both did, at pretty high levels in the White House, and I had a lot of great mentors, men and women both. But it's a high pressure situation for women. I felt like I drew lessons from both of those experiences. I think if she had won, I might. There are some of the obstacles that I think women face, and it's not that men are trying to hold women back, or that there's or that everybody that didn't vote for Hillary did so because of sexist attitudes, but that it just sort of revealed to me about how we still have a problem of questions about women and ambition, and it's
that word ambition, and
there's something about her I just don't like. I think that for women in power, you hear that a lot about women in power, not just women in politics, and I think it's because we spent many hundreds of years making politics sort of suited for men, and women still don't.
And you
quite
said you said that you told NPR that in around September of 2016, that you had a feeling that you could possibly that she could lose the election to President Trump, and you said he just rolled over 16 to 17 candidates on the Republican side, and then you know this quote well. We'll just play it one more time. In September of 2016, Hillary Clinton also said this.
To just be grossly generalistic, you could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Right? The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it.
And I was curious if those two moments came together from you, just from a communication standpoint, when you're a staffer and you're in the green room and you hear something, and did you know at that moment that was going to be a big deal?
I wasn't there, but when it happened. But when I heard about it, yes, I did know it was going to be a big deal. And it is, as she said, to be grossly generalistic, which you never should do, and to characterize I think in general, to characterize the motivations of voters is a dangerous thing.
You've had some time, obviously, to think about the loss, and I know you probably play it over and over in your head, but this book is broader. It's about advice to women. Do you think that in your lifetime, our lifetime, we're about the same age, that there will be a woman president?
I think that there will.
You still are optimistic about that?
Yes, I really am. I mean, in the book goes well beyond politics, because I think that, you see women, women are running for office in record numbers, but they're
Do you think that more women are running in response to Hillary Clinton's candidacy or in response to President Trump?
My impression is it's in response to President Trump. And I think that it was, a lot of women voted for President Trump. I get that. I think that for women who didn't, it was surprising, and it was unnerving that they thought that the country was going to make a certain decision, and it didn't. And I think that told people, maybe we're doing things wrong. And I said in the book that I felt we ran her as the female facsimile of the qualities we look for in a male president. Right, and it was a real gut punch.
And do you think that I have to? And they're trying to wrap me, but I could keep you all here. My last question is: given that, do you think if you were to run it again and to just let Hillary be Hillary, that she would have won?
It depends on all these other factors, and it's a different world that we're in now. So I think the first woman kind of had to go through that path that she did, and now I hope that the next candidate has an easier time.
Well, congratulations on the book.
Thanks, Dave.
I really like, especially like the rose gold.
I know,
it's a good choice.
Nice job.
All right, that's Jennifer Palmieri. Thank you so much. An unprecedented pledge from North Korea. China saying the rogue nation is now committed to getting rid of its nukes. How will that impact Kim Jong-un's proposed summit meeting with President Trump? China now saying that North Korea is committed to denuclearization after the top-secret meeting between China's president and Kim Jong-un was confirmed. And President Trump is praising the progress on his watch. Let's bring in retired four-star Admiral Robert Natter, former commander of the 7th Fleet. I wondered if you could help me figure it out. What is the truth here on this meeting between China and North Korea? Because I've read lots of commentary from both sides saying that this is China saying to Kim Jong-un, you better come here so that I can make sure that you are doing what I want you to do leading into this meeting. And then I read it that Kim Jong-un was saying, let me just tell you, there's a new sheriff in town. I'm not my father, and I'm going to tell you that I'm in a better position because I now have nuclear weapons. Which is it?
Well, I would suggest that the commentaries don't know any more than I know. Well, who I do think know are representatives of this country who have had a regular dialogue with the leadership of China on this subject.
And so everybody here is looking out after their own nation's interests. What interestingly to me is that leading into this today, in the White House press briefing that took place during this hour, Sarah Sanders, the press secretary, was talking at length about the agreement that the United States just made with South Korea for a free trade agreement. So a lot of the alliances, both on diplomatically and also militarily, are all happening simultaneously as we lead into this possible summit in May.
Well, it certainly is. And what's important here is that we've got long-standing relationships with nations like Japan. We have a treaty with them. We have treaties with other Asian nations. And we have a responsibility to help defend those nations. And we also have a responsibility to confront the threat of a nuclear-armed North Korea. And I think that's what's happening here. And hopefully these negotiations will be clear-eyed and successful.
Do you think that Kim Jong-un thinks about denuclearization the way that we might think about denuclearization? Or do you think he would try to fudge it? We had the news yesterday or this morning, I guess, that there is another reactor that is now being able to be seen from space. And so we've got word about that. And that, I think, in some ways makes things a little bit more difficult going into this discussion.
Well, look, they can't get any more difficult or simpler, in my view. The reality is that both sides have to sit down, and we need to get clear-cut, responsible actions on the part of North Korea, and they've got to be observable and enforceable. And we've also got to enlist the assistance of China to ensure that there is not a Northeast Asia nuclear race here. It's in China's interests also.
And do you think that China was delivering that message to him yesterday?
I would hope so. But again, I think only the leadership of the United States and China really know that.
Indeed. Well, we'll continue to touch base with you as we lead into May and see if this meeting actually happens. And we'll touch base with you as we get there. Admiral Robert Natter, thank you.
Thank you.
So the government working to manage a major crisis, cracking down on opioids as the death toll soars. FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb makes his first appearance on the Daily Briefing to discuss how his agency is battling addiction.
We'll be suing certain drug companies for what they've done with the opioids, and we'll be bringing the suits at a federal level.
Trump administration is following through on a campaign promise to combat the opioid crisis as the death toll rises across the country from the highly addictive drugs. CDC statistics show more than 63,000 people died from overdoses in 2016, up more than 10,000 from the previous year. Of that, opioids accounted for 2/3 of the fatalities. Deaths from synthetic opioids more than doubling, and heroin overdoses rising as well. Let's bring in FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb. I wanted to ask you, sir, is the opioid crisis the most vexing and most urgent problem that you're dealing with?
I think it's our biggest public health challenge right now facing the agency. This really began as a problem with prescription drugs. I think it's migrating to a problem more and more that encompasses street drugs. We see people transitioning onto street drugs, but most of the new addictions still happening from people who are first exposed to opioids through a legitimate prescription, a lawful prescription. So from our vantage point, I think we can play a very important role is trying to cut down the rate of new addiction by rationalizing prescribing, and we have a lot of tools to do that, and we've been focused on that part of the mission.
I know that President Trump said recently, and the Attorney General is talking about suing certain drug companies for problems, possibly ones in the past. But is that a productive way to do it if you're also trying to work with those companies to find pharmaceutical alternatives to either treat opioids or to find another way to treat pain?
Well, I'll leave the considerations about litigation to the Justice Department. I think that, we all made mistakes in the past in terms of my agency as well, in terms of our view about the addictive potential of these drugs. I think if you go back 15 years ago, we didn't recognize how addictive these products could be. So now I think the key is to try to recognize that we need to bring down the rates of prescribing. It's not just that too many prescriptions are being written, but when they are written, they're written for too many doses. And so we do need to work with the companies. We also need to work with companies to try to develop treatments for addiction, better medically assisted treatment to help the people who are currently addicted.
I know that Congress has allotted $500 million to fight the opioid crisis, but a lot of the states have not spent the money on that. And so I guess that maybe they're waiting to figure out a way to help fix the problem, because what do you spend the money on?
Well, a lot of that money is focused on treatment, and so they've allocated it. The states have to make decisions about how they're going to apportion that money on treatment. We recently got a slug of money. We got $94 million in the omnibus in the FY18 that we're going to focus on interdiction efforts. We play a role in the international mail facilities, trying to ferret out illicit drugs coming through those mail facilities. And a lot of the synthetic drugs that you talked about are coming through the mail.
And then what about, tell me what you're doing on nicotine, because I know that there's some controversy. Anytime people talk about nicotine, and especially e-cigarettes, and there's controversy regarding e-cigarettes, what are you trying to do?
We're trying to take steps to reduce the addictive value of cigarettes by rendering them minimally and non-addictive, by regulating the nicotine in combustible cigarettes. At the same time, we're looking at opportunities to try to transition currently addicted smokers onto products that could be reduced harm, could be modified risk products, including potentially e-cigarettes, which need to be put through an appropriate series of regulatory gates, but they might pose far less risk than smoking combustible cigarettes. We're also trying to open up the market for product innovation on nicotine replacement therapies like patches and gums, trying to bring more product variety for people, adults who still want access to nicotine, but we want to render the cigarettes themselves minimally or non-addictive.
And then my last question for you, because I wish I had more time with you, but I'm really interested in one of the things I believe that you said going into your job is that getting more drugs into generics sooner will help lower the price of prescription drugs for Americans. And you've made a lot of progress on that this past year. Is there more that can be done?
That's right. We approved a record number of generic drugs last year, more than 1,000. We think there's a lot more that we can be done. We see activities in the marketplace that are impeding the ability of generic companies to bring drugs onto the market, actually frustrating their abilities to do the studies they need to do to get their drugs onto the market. We've been trying to attack those, what we call shenanigans, sometimes played by the branded companies, where they make it hard for the generic companies to do the studies they need to do to copy their drugs.
And then so I wanted to ask you also this about, I think we only have 90 seconds, but the president had said that this issue about right to try is legislation that's important to a lot of members. The vice president talked about it a lot. The president talked about it in the State of the Union. And this would allow people to try to do treatments based on drugs that are not yet approved by the FDA. What is the role that the FDA has in trying to get right to try passed?
Well, we've been providing technical assistance to Congress. There's a couple of different bills working through Congress. One was passed in the Senate. There's another bill in the House. That House bill recently passed the House and now is going back to the Senate. We provided technical assistance to the committee that was drafting that bill, trying to build in certain patient protections, which they did. So we think that there's important patient protections built into that legislation. Now it's up to the Senate to see if they pass it.
If they can match that. Well, we appreciate you coming in today, and we will touch base with you. The opioid issue is something that Fox News certainly covers a lot, and we're interested in how we can both prevent people from getting addicted and then treat them if they are.
Thanks a lot.
All right, Scott Gottlieb of the FDA, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. It was a busy hour, and we have more to come. 2 more days left in the week. I'm Dana Perino, and guess what? Shep is up after the break.